Hi everyone, this is Rooster Woodworking, and today we are building a teacup shelf using some custom-made jigs to create some really tight fitting dados. So this project started after I took a pottery class and ended up making dozens of teacups. I then scoured the internet to try to find the best storage solution for them, and all of the designs kind of came short for me. That is, until I found this one. This is made by a Danish company, and I really love the design. The only problem with this shelf is that, well, it was about $550. So like every overconfident woodworker, I said, hey, I can make that. Like most of my designs, this started on Fusion 360, just drawing up a general idea of what I wanted the shelf to look like and what parts I was going to need. After playing with proportions a little bit, I had a good idea of what the end results would be and also how much wood I was going to need to purchase. I chose to go with red oak for this project. I really like the look of red oak, and it's also very accessible and usually fairly cheap. I started by roughly laying out where I would need to cut to create the box that would be the outer shell of the shelf. After that, it was off to the planer to bring everything to the right thickness. After that, I used the table saw to clean up both edges of the boards. Then I could bring each board to the final width of 4.5 inches. I then lined up each pieces to match the grain as much as possible and marked where my miters needed to be cut. Once I had my main box, it was time for me to figure out how to put those shelves in the middle. In the end, I decided to go with stopped dados. I cut my shelf stock to 3.5 inches to leave room behind for a backer. Using a combination of my table saw sled and a block on the fence, I could cut all my shelf stock to the same exact length. That also allows me to check the length and fine-tune if needed. Once the length is right, it's just rinse and repeat for all 4 shelves. Once all my stock was cut to size, it was time to mark the location of each dados that would go in the sides of the box that I created earlier. I also made sure to mark out the locations of the notches in the shelves that would receive the central dividers. Now, I needed a way to create a stopped dado in the sides of the case that would be repeatable and consistent. To do that, I created a quick jig that would have a notch matching the exact size of the dado I needed. After cleaning it all up, I had a perfect template for a rectangle dado. All I needed to do now was attach it to a fence that would ensure that the dado was square to the face every single time. I just took my time, used some double-sided tape to set the template completely square. I then added the fence using screws. And we're still square. After setting up my router with a bush bearing, I used double-sided tape to stick both pieces together and make sure that I could cut the dado in the same location with both pieces. I then stuck my template on and used the router to write away at the dado. After that, I used a straight piece of plywood to extend my template to the other side of the shelf. I was then left with a perfect stop dado in both sides of the shelves that were exactly at the same location. After that, it was the same process over and over again, taking line passes, transferring the template to the other side, and repeating until I had 4 stop dados in each side. I then cut a groove in each panel that will welcome the backer panel as well as a French cleat to hang the shelf up. Ideally, you would use a dado stack for this. I just got very lazy and decided to do a bajillion passes. That was pretty nice though. Then it was back at the table saw sled to cut all the tenons to size. Just like that, we had some snug fitting tenons. After that, it was time to cut the divider notches in the shelves. I used a combination of a dado stack and a miter gauge with a sacrificial flanks. The trick here is to really take your time on that cut because that blade is taking a lot of material out at once. And once again, it was rinse and repeat for all 4 shelves. Now, to make the stop dado work, I needed to cut a notch out of the front of the dado on each shelf. I used the marking gauge to know how far I needed to cut into the shelf. and then reported that distance on the shelf before cutting it with a handsaw. After rounding off the dado to match the profile of the routing bit, it was time for a dry fit. And look at that, nice and flush. After doing a quick dry assembly to make sure that everything was looking alright, it was time to sand all the pieces. I made sure to label all the faces and all the shelves, and proceeded to go from 80 grit all the way up to 220 grit. It was then time for the glue up. Now, glue up can be a little bit scary, so I like to do them in steps. And for this one, I decided to glue in all the shelves first, and then to finish the box with the 2 miters. My reason behind that is because dados will make the frame perfectly square, and then I would just need to add the 2 mitered tops and bottoms. While this was drying, I cut all the divider pieces to size. Now, I need to cut a 3/4 inch dado in each of those pieces to make them fit within my shelves. Now, usually I would do it exactly like that. I would stack up dado until it matches exactly the thickness of the stock, and then proceed to install it on the table saw. In this case, however, 3/4 inches would bring my dado really close to the edge of the knurling, and I didn't really like that. So using a smaller dado and a combination of different stop blocks and clamps, I proceeded to cut all the notches in my divider pieces. Now, this can look a little bit sketchy, but I really took my time and used a very strong clamp. If you're not comfortable doing that kind of cut, please do not. It is not worth it. And just like that, we had a tight fit. Once the main frame was dry, I could add on the 2 mitered top and bottom, making sure that I orient them properly. I absolutely love those ratchet clamps. They are very handy and create a very tight pressure on all miter corners. I also added all my divider pieces with a little bit of glue, and some of them needed a little bit more convincing than others. I then added a 1/8 of an inch round over to all the faces. After cutting down all my French cleats to width, I also cut down some smaller pieces to act as the top and bottom dividers on the top and bottom shelves. For the backer, I used a 1/2 inch sheet of MDF that I would then veneer with some decorative paper. To do that, I just lathered the MDF sheet in glue and then proceeded to add the paper, making sure to roll it as I went. I also used a lot of those handy spring clamps that I found from the big box store. They're about $1 each and really handy in those situations. The goal here is to have good contact between the paper and the MDF, so any kind of clamping pressure is great. Now it was time to add the center divider for the top and bottom shelves. I will just mark where they're supposed to be and then tack them on with some CA glue and wood glue. As a finish for the frame, I used Atomic Finishes wood oil. I really like this finish. It is a one coat, just wipe on, wipe off, and very low maintenance. Finally, I added my backer sheets and held it in place with brad nails. I then added my French cleat to the back of the panel, which will hang the cabinet on the wall. And just like that, we had a teacup shelf. I hope you enjoyed this video, and for more projects, make sure to like and subscribe. See you in the next one.